The train rattled along the worn-out tracks, a groaning rhythm that seemed to echo the heaviness in my chest. I stood near the door, clutching the cold metal pole like it was the only thing holding me up. My shirt was damp with the sweat of another hard day, 8 hours at the garage, lungs full of grease and lies. No one noticed me. No one ever did. Until she did. She stepped onto the train at Clifton Station. Red scarf, black coat, bare hands despite the cold. She didn't sit, just stood in front of me, close enough that I caught the faint scent of sandalwood and something older, almost like ash after a fire. Her eyes met mine, calm, steady, a little too steady. I blinked and looked away, embarrassed, trying to shrink myself down into invisibility again. But I could feel her eyes still on me watching. That's when it started. First, it was the sudden silence. The usual rattle of the train, gone. No hum, no screech, no voices, just stillness. The world outside the windows slowed down, like someone was dragging their finger across a video frame by frame. Then, for one breathless moment, everything froze. No one else noticed. I opened my mouth, about to say something, anything. But then the train jolted back to life. A baby cried at the far end of the carriage. A man cleared his throat. A bell chimed. Everything was normal again. Everything except her. She was still staring. "You felt that too, didn't you?" she said softly, like we were sharing a dream. I nodded before I could stop myself. After that, we kept meeting. Every evening, same train, same car. Her name was Layla. She spoke like someone from nowhere, her words heavy with history. She never asked about my past, but somehow she knew. Knew about my mother's debts, about the night I slept in the rain, about how I still dreamt of my sister's laugh. Even though it had been 7 years since the fire, Layla told me the world was thinning. Things are slipping through, she whispered one night as the lights flickered overhead. Ghosts of choices, shadows of people who never existed. They're watching us. I thought she was teasing me. I wanted her to be. But then came the footprints, wet, even when it hadn't rained. The dreams where I was awake, seeing her burn from the inside out. And the man in the brown coat, always sitting 3 rows down, always reading the same page of a book whose title kept changing. I told my best friend, Daniel. He was the only one I trusted. We grew up in the same orphanage, and he'd seen enough to believe strange things without laughing. "You need to stop seeing her," he warned. "There's something wrong with her. She's not here. Not fully." But I couldn't. Layla had become the only thing that made the days bearable. She made the world feel like it meant something again. Then tonight happened. The train was half empty. Layla stood in front of me again, only this time she looked afraid. "They're here," she said. Before I could ask who, the lights died. Pitch black. A hand brushed my face. Not hers. I reached into my coat. My fingers wrapped around something cold and jagged. I didn't remember putting it there. A piece of glass. No, a shard of mirror. "Don't do it," Layla whispered. But I did. I raised the mirror shard and held it up to her face. She didn't have a reflection. The train screeched, and the doors opened. But we weren't at a station. Her fingers trembled as she dug through the trash outside the station, knuckles scraped raw from the cold. The night air bit at her skin, cruel and sharp, but she barely noticed. She was too focused on the torn plastic bag in front of her, frantically searching for what she knew was already gone. The box. A small, worn red velvet box. It had slipped from her pocket sometime between the ticket counter and the alley behind the tea stall. Maybe when she was jostled by that man in the blue jacket. Maybe when she dropped her scarf. She didn't know. All she knew was that it was gone, and with it, the last thing she had left of her mother. She sank to her knees, ignoring the puddles soaking through her jeans. Her chest tightened. Not the kind of tightness you cry through, but the kind that closes your throat and leaves you shaking in silence. Her mother's ring had been inside that box. Not valuable. Not gold, just a simple silver band with a single scratch across the edge. But it was hers. It was all she had to prove her mother had existed at all. People walked past her without looking. A security guard glanced her way and turned back to his phone. She pulled her hood over her head and curled her fingers into fists. She'd promised herself she wouldn't fall apart again. Not in public, not here. But everything felt so heavy, being invisible, being poor, carrying every damn loss in silence. She stood up slowly, heart pounding like she was trying to rise from underwater. The train's horn blared. Departure time. She wiped her hands on her coat and headed inside. Not because she had anywhere to go. She didn't even have a ticket. But because the platforms were warmer than the street, and if she stood still enough, sometimes no one noticed she didn't belong. She pushed through the crowd, eyes down, when she saw him. He was leaning against the wall near platform 7, tall, slouched, cigarette in hand, a face like trouble-dressed and tired charm. Their eyes met for just a second, and something shifted. She didn't know yet that the world had started to bend around her. Didn't know the ring was never truly lost. Didn't know that the man watching her had been waiting for exactly this moment. Not yet. All she knew was she felt seen, and for someone like her, that was the beginning of something dangerous. She went by Mira now. It wasn't her real name, but it was easier for strangers to say. And no one ever asked for more than a name. Not when you kept your eyes down. Not when you moved like you belonged nowhere. She was 22. Maybe. She wasn't sure anymore. Birthdays had stopped meaning anything after the age of 13, when her uncle slammed the door shut and told her not to come back. Too many mouths, too little space, he'd said. As if she were just an extra shadow in a house that already had too many ghosts. Since then, Mira had been surviving the same way she always had, quietly. She lived in an abandoned room above a shuttered photocopy shop near the station. No electricity, no water. A single mattress on the floor, patched jeans for curtains, and a plastic bottle she refilled at the public tap 2 blocks down. She kept a small backpack with her at all times. Not because it held anything valuable. Just a few clothes, a book with half its pages missing, a cheap charger she could use if she found an open socket. But that backpack was her life. If someone took it, she wouldn't even have a name anymore. Every morning she washed her face with cold water and tied her hair back so tightly it gave her headaches. She'd slip into the train station by 6 a.m., blend in with the early rush, and walk the platforms pretending she was headed somewhere. Sometimes she helped carry bags or gave directions to tourists for a few coins. Sometimes she just smiled at the right person long enough to be handed leftover chai and a biscuit. And sometimes she stole, not proudly, not carelessly, but with the desperation of someone who'd run out of better choices. She tried to avoid stealing from women, from the elderly, from kids. It was a line she drew in a life with no rules. She told herself that was how she stayed human. Most nights, she didn't sleep much. Too many sounds, rats, sirens, footsteps, too many dreams. She dreamt of her mother's laugh and the warmth of lentils cooking on a real stove, of the way her father used to read to her from a book about stars before the cancer took him, of home, before it was stripped down into silence and shame. She still wrote sometimes, little scraps of poems on paper napkins, receipts, anything she could find. Words were the only thing she had that no one could take from her, not even the world. No one knew her story. No one cared to. Until that night on the train when the lights flickered, and the stranger in the black coat looked at her like he'd heard her even before she spoke. Like he already knew she didn't believe in miracles, and was about to show her why she should. It started small. The first time, she thought it was just her mind playing tricks after another sleepless night. She had dozed off curled against a bench on platform 6, her backpack clutched to her chest, the early morning chill digging into her bones. When she woke, it was still dark, but something was off. The air was too still. The usual clatter of distant trains, the shuffle of tired feet, the hum of platform lights. Gone. Total silence. Then she heard it, a soft, whispering sound, like someone breathing just behind her ear. She turned quickly. No one. A chill slid down her spine. Later that same day, when she passed a vendor's stall to steal a glance at her reflection in the metal tea kettle, she froze. For a split second, her reflection didn't mimic her. It stared back with a tilt of the head she hadn't made, eyes just slightly too dark, as if something inside them had been hollowed out. And then it was normal again. She told herself she was just tired, malnourished, maybe going a little mad. It happened, didn't it? People who lived on the edges started seeing things, hearing things. That's what the city did. It gnawed at your mind slowly. But then the dreams began. Always the same, always vivid. She would be standing on the train tracks barefoot, the metal frozen cold under her skin. Across from her, on the other side, was a figure cloaked in shadows. No face, no features, just the shape of a man. and he would raise his hand, not in greeting, but in recognition, like he'd been waiting. Each time she tried to step forward, the sound of a distant whistle would grow louder, sharper until it split her ears and jolted her awake. Her dreams bled into her days. She'd look out across a crowded platform and catch the shadow of someone watching her. Too still to be real, too present to be imagined. The same man. Always too far to see clearly, always gone the moment she blinked. And strange things kept happening. A pigeon flying in circles above her head, again and again until she stepped away. A message written in charcoal on the station wall. She walks where the veil is thin. Gone the next day, painted over in gray. Her friend, Daniel, said it was the stress, that she needed rest, food, sleep, normal things. He even brought her a wool shawl one night and swore he'd stay up with her. But he didn't see the footprints. Not until they appeared on the ceiling of her room. Bare, wet. Leading from one wall to the other, she stopped telling him things after that. Because if the world was bending, if something was seeping through the cracks, it had chosen her, and she could feel it getting closer. She moved through Penn Station like a ghost. Layers of city noise wrapped around her. Announcements blaring, footsteps pounding, the thick scent of hot dogs and wet concrete. But inside, she felt nothing. Just another day. Just another hour pretending she belonged. She kept her eyes low, hood up, fingers tight around the strap of her worn-out backpack. She hadn't eaten since yesterday, but hunger had stopped being urgent. It was more like background music now. She was about to slip past a crowd gathering near platform 4 when her gaze caught on someone. A man. He leaned against a concrete pillar like he had nowhere to be, but everything about him felt sharp. Dark jacket, messy hair, a book in his hand. But he wasn't reading it. He was watching people, scanning them quietly like he was looking for someone who didn't want to be found. And then his eyes landed on her. Mira froze, not because he looked dangerous, not even because he was handsome, though he was in a raw, reckless sort of way, but because when he saw her, he paused, like he actually saw her, not just her body or her worn clothes, but her. Her heart gave a strange little lurch. She hadn't felt that in years, maybe. She turned her head fast. What was she thinking? Guys like that didn't look at girls like her. She'd slept in an abandoned laundromat last night. She had blisters in her boots and hair she hadn't washed in 4 days. Whatever tiny spark flickered inside her, that was a mistake, a glitch in the wiring. But then she looked again. He hadn't moved, still watching, and now he was smiling. It wasn't cocky. It wasn't mocking. It was soft. Careful. She felt her face flush and looked away again, her fingers tightening on her backpack. No, she told herself. Don't get pulled in. Don't be that girl. You know better. But the truth was, she didn't know better. She didn't know what it felt like to be wanted. To be noticed, not pitied. And in that second, something deep inside her, a quiet, hidden hope, stirred awake. For the first time in a long, long while, she wondered what it might feel like to let someone in, even if he was a stranger. Even if the world around her had already started to go wrong. Even if the dreams, the footsteps, the shadows and mirrors were all warning her not to. Because sometimes, even in a city that doesn't care if you live or disappear, one look from the right person can change everything. New York City was cold that night, the kind of cold that didn't just bite your skin. It carved pieces out of your soul, slow and quiet. Mira's shoes were worn through. Water crept into her socks with every step, soaking her toes in a way that reminded her, yeah, this is still your life. Warm tea was a fantasy. A bed was a bench at best. She pulled her hoodie tighter and melted into the noise of the station. Platform 4, the place she often drifted to. No one stopped her. But no one asked if she was okay, either. And then she saw him. He was leaning against a concrete pillar like he belonged to a different world. Dark jacket, collar slightly turned up. One hand in his pocket, the other holding a book. Open. But he wasn't reading. He was watching people, carefully, like he was looking for someone who didn't want to be found. And then his eyes landed on Mira. For just 1 second, everything stopped. The sounds of the station blurred into nothing. He didn't say anything. He just looked right at her. Not at her torn clothes, not at her boots or beaten-down backpack. At her. Mira's chest tightened, something strange fluttering in her ribs. Like someone had touched a part of her she'd buried years ago. She quickly looked away. Don't be stupid, she whispered inside her head. You're nobody. He's not looking at you. And if he is, there's a reason, and it's probably not good. But still, she glanced again. He was still there, still watching. And now he was smiling, not in a mocking way, not flirty or fake. It was the kind of smile that said, I see you. The kind that didn't pity, didn't pretend, just understood. Mira's throat went dry, her breath caught. She hadn't seen a smile like that in years, maybe ever. In that moment, she knew, if that boy said anything, even just one word, she might cry, not because she was sad, but because someone had finally noticed her. But he didn't speak, and she didn't ask. The moment passed, the train came, the platform moved on, but that look, it stayed. Something inside Mira shifted that night, a soft pull, a quiet ache. Maybe he was lonely too. Maybe he carried his own ghosts. And maybe, just maybe, their loneliness had been walking toward the same place all along. The next morning, Mira sat cross-legged behind a stack of old crates near the back of the station. Steam rose from a dented paper cup in her hands. Cheap diner coffee, still too hot, still a luxury. Across from her, Danny was tearing apart a toasted bagel and talking between bites like he hadn't eaten in a week. Which he probably hadn't. You know, he said, pointing at her with a piece of bread. You've got that look again. She raised an eyebrow. What look? Or that I saw something I wasn't supposed to? And now I'm pretending it doesn't scare the hell out of me, look. He leaned in. So what was it this time? Floating shadow, backwards reflection. A ghost on the escalator. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared into her coffee. The boy from last night was still in her head, the way his eyes had held hers, the quiet recognition in them, the smile that hadn't felt like it belonged in this world. It wasn't like that, she said finally. It was just someone. Danny narrowed his eyes. Someone? She nodded, almost to herself. He looked at me like he knew me, like he wasn't surprised I was there, and for a second it felt like... She stopped, realizing how crazy she sounded. Danny didn't laugh. He never did, not when it mattered. Instead, he leaned back and pulled his hood tighter around his ears. You know what I think? What? I think you spend so much time trying not to be seen, you forgot what it feels like when someone actually does. His words hit harder than she expected. Danny had known her since they were both 15, sleeping under the same bridge in Queens during the worst winter of their lives. He was the first person who gave her half a sandwich without asking for something in return. They didn't talk about love or family or future. Just food, warmth, and staying alive. That was enough, and yet somehow he always knew when something in her heart had shifted. You trust too easily, she said, deflecting. No, he smiled, finishing his bagel. I just see through you faster than most people. She rolled her eyes but smiled despite herself. That was Danny. Rough around the edges, mouthy, fast with his sarcasm, but loyal in a way few people in this city ever dared to be. He was her anchor, the one who reminded her she wasn't completely drifting. And maybe if she told him the whole truth. The dreams, the things that moved when no one was watching, the man with the two still stare. Maybe he could help her make sense of it all. Or maybe he'd tell her to run. Either way, she knew one thing for sure: if this world was falling apart, Danny would be the last hand she'd hold before the lights went out. That night, Mira couldn't sleep. She lay curled on the mattress in her crumbling upstairs, hideout above the closed print shop, the city's noise muffled to a distant hum. Danny had given her half a sandwich and told her, again, to stay away from strange smiles and men who feel like secrets. But her mind wouldn't let go of those eyes. His face had followed her all day, slipping into thoughts like fog into alleyways. Not just the way he looked at her, but the stillness, the sense that he had been waiting. The lights flickered. She sat up sharply. It wasn't just her bulb this time. The street lamp outside blinked twice, then went black. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was wrong, too deep, like sound had been swallowed. Then came the knock, soft once. She held her breath. No one knew she lived here. No one should know. The knock came again. 3 slow raps, like a rhythm she should recognize but didn't. She rose, heart racing. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide. But her feet moved anyway. She crossed the floor barefoot, each board creaking beneath her weight, and stood by the door, not daring to breathe. Another knock. She gripped the doorknob. Then she paused. A soft sound. A whisper from the other side of the door. Not a voice. More like 1,000 leaves rustling at once. Dry, ancient, hungry. Myra. The voice knew her name. Her blood turned to ice. She yanked the door open. No one there. Just the dark hallway. Empty. Still, until she looked down and saw wet footprints. Bare feet. Leading into her room. Not away from it. And written on the wall behind her. Smeared in something black and glistening. Wayo. Mar envivar Eloan. She turned, breath shaking. And there, in the reflection of her cracked window, stood him. Not the boy from the train, not Danny. Something else. His shape was human, but his face was wrong. Hollow where eyes should be. A mouth that didn't open but grinned. She spun around. No one there. But in the silence, she knew it now. This wasn't just dreams or shadows or trauma. Something had found her. And it wasn't going to stop.